As we read in 1 Peter 4:17, judgment begins in the house of the Lord. And today's story about Chris Reed's sudden resignation is the third situation like this being exposed this year. But as you can see, we have another abuse situation that's being brought to light. And you can go to X and read the actual letter that Chris wrote. He says that after much prayer, thought, and consideration, he's decided to fully and immediately step down from all leadership responsibilities at Morningstar Ministries.
Warning. The following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Chris Reed, the pastor, CEO, and director of the Morningstar Ministry, has suddenly resigned amidst sex scandal. Another mega pastor in 2024 went down. Let's get into it.
We have some major news to discuss because Chris Reed is out at Morningstar Ministries. This came out of nowhere. Nobody, expected this. There was no prior announcement, nothing like that at all. And, as most of you know, Chris Reed has been, running Morningstar Ministries. Really, he was given the keys from Rick Joyner, has been operating as both the CEO, the president, and even the senior pastor of Morningstar Church there in Fort Mill, South Carolina. But not anymore. In a resignation letter that was submitted by Chris Reed, it was on Monday, August 26th. The letter was submitted to Rick Joyner. He accepted the resignation. Now, this wasn't a situation to where, he would resign at the end of the year. He would stay on for a transition period. No, the resignation was to be done immediately. So he is gone. So what did Chris Reed have to say in his statement? But also, what did Rick Joyner have to say? Because Rick responded after Chris had took to X and posted his reasons for why he was leaving. We're going to get into all of that here in just a second. Chris Reed, this was a shocker because who would have saw this coming? Now, he puts out this resignation statement he submitted it on Monday, August 26th, and then he took to X to explain a little bit further. Now, again, this resignation was from all forms of ministry with Morningstar. Okay, that goes for his title as CEO, president, and also the senior pastor of the Morningstar Church. And all of these resignations are effective now. Again, this ain't, 2 months down the road or at the end of the year. It's all right now. So no transition here, nothing like that at all. And as Chris, gave his statement, you guys can go to his X if you want, and you can read the full statement there. Or you could even go to Rick Joyner's X account too, and you can read his reply to the whole thing. But Chris says he's heartbroken by this decision, that he had to resign, because he says that it wasn't something that he wanted to do, which, you look at that, and again, it's still very vague. Not the whole story has not yet been told as to why Chris is leaving. But, he says that, he wants to get back to, what he does, and that's prophesy, preaching and teaching. But wasn't he doing that already with Morningstar? That's what's kind of weird, because as I read his statement, I'm saying, okay, well, you're doing that. I mean, you're giving prophecies. And look, Chris Reed has gotten it wrong on prophecy before, but he's still doing it just because he was CEO and president. He was still senior pastor of the church. He's still teaching. And he also says that he has plans to, work this home church network group where he's, trying to put together a vision for those that want to start home churches. And he says that he's going to continue on with his prophetic teaching school, and even has plans later on down the road to move to a different part of South Carolina, where he plans to perhaps pastor another church at some point in the future. But he talked about how, this was done with much prayer, consideration, chat with other believers about what to do, and this was the only decision that could be made. That this has to happen and had to happen right away.
He goes on to say that after working there for 3 years, he can no longer continue in his role. His calling has always been and remains to prophesy. You mean falsely prophesy, like when you said that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would not be leading the Democratic Party in the next election cycle. He's going to continue to train and lead others in an online school of the prophetic, similar to what he created with the School of the Prophets. The School of Prophets, where they charge you $2,600 to attend. And in this school, you can connect with like-minded believers who are hungry for more of God's prophetic activity in their lives. But wouldn't they have to be prophets chosen by God first? But you'll get to experience dynamic teaching in a corporate setting, face-to-face prophetic exercises, and hands-on spiritual activations, just like we read about in the Book of Deceptions. What a load of hogwash. If you can't see what a scam this is, I can only pray God opens your eyes. There is nothing about prophets doing face-to-face prophetic exercises in the Bible, and we can't activate anything spiritual in anyone. I dare you, I double dog dare you, to show me one Bible verse that says we can activate spiritual things. Anyhow, let's get back to his letter. He says that at some point he plans to relocate and start a new church in another part of South Carolina, even though right now he has no money and will be unemployed. Really? You have no highlighted money? It looks like your expensive school is doing quite well. That's a lot of people at $2,600 a crack. Not to mention, you have this school going on every month for the next 9 months. Sorry, I keep getting off track. I just think there's more to the story than meets the eye. But now we get to the main point of the story. And that's that in the late spring of 2023, allegations surfaced against a former volunteer and police officer. And these were terrible crimes against the wee ones. And that person was Erickson Douglas Lee, who turned himself in on May 3rd, 2023. And you can find all sorts of reports online about how dark this really is. And Chris goes on to say how close to home this hits because him and his wife also went through a similar situation in their youth. But my question is, why did it take Chris this long to resign if this stirred up past memories? If they knew about this over a year ago, that means Chris Reed chose to stay with Morningstar for over a year after knowing that. Something just doesn't add up. Anyhow, that's the latest news and the supposed reason Chris is stepping down from Morningstar. But in my personal opinion, I don't think this is the reason at all, being that he knew about these heinous acts for over a year. I think this is the perfect excuse to leave, because like many in the New Apostolic Reformation, it's all about the money. And going independent gives him a bigger piece of the New Apostolic pie.
And, again, he says, I know people are going to have questions about this. He says he has no ill will towards anybody at Morningstar whatsoever, but that it was his time to move on and continue his work in ministry. Now, there's going to be speculation that's going to run rampant about, again, why he left. Now, we may find out more in the days, the weeks, the months to come. We will see. We'll report on it to you if anything else comes out. But Chris did bring up one specific instance that happened back in the spring of 2023, because these were things that people were touching on, and they wanted to know if this had anything to do with it. Now, back then, there had been allegations of inappropriate behavior involving a volunteer at Morningstar who was also a police officer. And that individual having inappropriate behavior with apparently multiple boys there at the church. Now, this was something that Chris said that he was not the one running the show at Morningstar when these allegations first broke. But he did say that immediately upon hearing about it, they reported it to the police, that there was an investigation into it, and then Chris had, introduced proper safeguarding to keep, members of Morningstar safe. And then Chris said too, he says, look, myself and my wife are victims of inappropriate behavior. So they said, we take this very seriously. Chris said that it happened to him when he was only 7. So whether or not people were trying to somehow, rope Chris in with this and say that he tried to cover this up or whatever, he went out there and he tried to set the record straight, and said again that, we did everything that we were supposed to do. We contacted police, we got them on this, and they took care of it. So that's the statement. Again, there's a little bit more. You can read more about it over on his X account if you guys want to go check that out.
Many of you have asked me the question, where can I get a good book on Christian Bible doctrine? I've compiled this one on the fundamental beliefs of Christianity from an Arminian perspective, since I am an Arminian minister, meaning that I'm not Calvinist. I believe in the Arminian doctrine that man does have a free will. So I cover all of those doctrines, every major doctrine in Christianity in this book. It's well over 300 pages long. Get your copy today. It's free. I'm not charging a dime for it. My email is pastorvonhanshaw@gmail.com. Order your copy today. Let's get back into the program. Hello, friends. I hope you're enjoying today's program. If you are, I would ask that you would, first of all, subscribe to my channel, like this video, comment on it, and share this on your social media platforms. It really does help the channel grow, and it helps me spread the word of truth. Thank you very much. I want to offer you a book I wrote called Understanding Christian Apologetics, a Comprehensive Guide. Why do I expose false teachers, false prophets, and heretics on my YouTube channel? Am I a gossip? Am I a slanderer? Do I bring division to the body of Christ? Why do I do this? This book, Understanding Christian Apologetics, goes into a deep, thorough analysis of why I do what I do. What is the ministry of discernment, understanding Christian apologetics? This is an ebook. It's free of charge, no cost to you. Order your copy today. Now let's get back into the program.
But I want to get to Rick Joyner's statement, his reply to this, his response, because this was something that was very interesting. The first thing that I got from Rick Joyner's statement was that he was not happy at all. He was not happy at all with Chris Reed's decision to leave. And look, I am not a fan of Rick Joyner. I have spoken my piece about him before in the past, about how I believe that, not only is he a false teacher, but he surrounds himself with many other questionable characters, two of which I'm going to talk about here in a second, because he even name dropped these individuals in his statement. Rick said that, and this is what the word that he was using as he was trying to draw comparisons here that he has seen many leaders in ministry will basically get cheated out of more, more proper years in ministry, more active years in ministry because of deception, because of deceit. So he's indicating here that Chris Reed is somehow deceived, that his reason for leaving is based upon deception, right? Listening to the enemy, listening to the wrong people. I don't know, maybe Chris kind of woke up and realized that working alongside someone the likes of Rick Joyner is maybe not the best thing to do. Because with Chris leaving, again, all duties he's done, the ministry is handed back over to Rick Joyner now, okay? It's back over to him. And, what do we always talk about? People don't like it. And I just covered this the other day in the video that I did about Rod Parsley. And if you missed that video, I encourage you to go back on my channel and check it out. It's getting a lot of good reception from people. It's about a 25-minute video where I really kind of break down the berating that Rod Parsley and his daughter did to their congregation, accusing people of being reprobates if you leave their church. It's unbelievable. Is you can go watch that video if you want to. But that was the vibe I got here from Joyner. He's not happy that Chris has left. So what is he going to say? Of course, he's deceived, right? What did we see from anybody that would leave, that left IHOP KC during the whole Mike Bickle saga, right? So many people came out. They too were, called names, right? It's how cults operate. You can never just go. You can never just leave a ministry, even or a church or a ministry, because even for the leaders, a lot of times they're in the same boat, right? Everything is all good when you're on their side, but then if someone decides to step down for whatever reason, they're called names, they're targeted, they're listening to the devil, they're this, they're that, whatever. No, they can't have any good reason for wanting to leave, right? And I talked in my video the other day, like, what if the Holy Spirit is giving them discernment to get out of there? Okay, I don't know Chris Reed's heart. Okay, I don't know, again, what led him to this decision. But if he felt that it was in his best interest to go, then good for him. Good for him. But let me get back to Rick Joyner. Because again, the whole theme behind his post, his response was deception. And he says, I've seen a lot of great spiritual leaders get cheated out of more time in ministry, including the likes of my good buddies Bob Jones and Paul Cain. This guy drops Bob Jones and Paul Cain. Bob Jones and Paul Cain, two preds in their own right who are accused of horrible things, right? Inappropriate behavior with little ones and all these things, right? And Paul Cain, my God, I mean, how many times that guy was allowed back in Michigan? Again, Mike Bickle, all these. Joyner is buddies with all of them. Joyner loves Mike Bickle, right? Look what happened when all the Bickle allegations came out, right? I covered the story back in the fall of 2023. Rick Joyner was one of the first ones that came out in support of Mike Bickle, singing the guy's praises, right? So here in this response to Chris Reed, he's bringing up, deception. I mean, man, it hurt Bob Jones. It hurt Paul Cain. No, Bob Jones and Paul Cain's actions hurt them, not deception. Okay? It was deception that was actually put onto the people by the likes of Bob Jones and by the likes of Paul Cain. That's what really happened here. But the fact that he would even bring these two men up as somehow they're trusted men in the ministry, right? Ones that we can look up to. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. But again, this is Rick Joyner we are talking about here. So he also goes on to say that he believes that Chris is at a very crucial point in his life. He's at this crossroads, if you will. And, he talks about how many men in the Bible even had, missed it at times where they weren't hearing the voice of God. But eventually they would, come back to it. Almost as if Joyner is saying Chris will maybe hopefully come back home one day. I hope he doesn't, to be perfectly honest with you. So Joyner then goes into, he talks as well about the allegations, excuse me there, voice cracking. Talks again about the allegations involving the inappropriate behavior with the volunteer who was the police officer. He said all that was true. He said all that is true. He says, but again, we did our part at Morningstar. We contacted authorities. We got that handled. But then he mentions one particular family of one of the victims that was unfortunately a part of this, who had decided to sue Rick Joyner and Morningstar Ministries. Now, they claim that, this was the responsibility of the church and, they'd allowed this to happen. Now, Joyner says that the inappropriate behavior that happened to these victims did not actually happen anywhere on the church grounds. But it says for whatever reason, they're still wanting to come after the church. In fact, Rick Joyner has said that they don't want to settle with this family. They are willing to take this to trial just to prove their innocence in this entire matter. So, well, I hope they can do that if they really want to prove their innocence here. Rick Joyner kind of concluded it by saying that, he wishes Chris Reed the best, but again, this whole thing tying it to him being deceived, I'm not going for that. I'm not going for that whatsoever.
I want to make you aware of an ebook that I have wrote, Von Hanshaw, Commentary on Cults. This is a book where I describe the characteristics of cults, cult leaders, the major cults that most of us are aware about, and dozens of cults that most of us have never heard of. And is your church a cult, or is it leaning toward becoming a cult? This is a book that you definitely need in your ebook library. It's free of charge. Order your copy today. My email address is pastorvonhanshaw@gmail.com. Order your copy today. Let's get back into the program. I want to make you aware of a book I have completed, a summary of each book in the Bible. It's an ebook. It's free of charge. And what I've done, I've went through each book of the Bible, give a detailed summary, the key points, a basic outline of each book, the author if it's known, the date of the writing, all the information that you need at your fingertips on every book in the Bible. It's a great resource for your theological Christian library. Order your free copy today. My email address is pastorvonhanshaw@gmail.com. Let's get back into the program. Hello, I want to make you aware of an e-newsletter through your email that I send out every month. If you would like to subscribe to my email newsletter, please email me at pastorvonhanshaw@gmail.com. I go over in detail a lot of these videos that I produce about these false teachers and false prophets and these wolves in sheep's clothing. I go into detail into the backstory, a lot of these information, a lot of these guys who they're connected with, more in depth on their false teaching, their lifestyle, and much more in this monthly newsletter. Again, if you would like to subscribe, email me, pastorvonhanshaw@gmail.com, and I will get you signed up. It's free of charge. I look forward to hearing from you today. Let's get back into the program.
Joyner is upset. He's mad and he's making excuses as to why Chris Reed is no longer there. Of course, not pointing the finger at himself in this case by saying, hey, maybe it's my fault. Maybe it was something that I did. maybe it's the fact that I've been buddying up to people like Mike Bickle and, all these, singing the praises of Bob Jones and Paul Cain. Maybe that became too much for Chris Reed. And he said, you know what? I can't work under these conditions anymore. I can't. And if that's the reason, then good for Chris Reed, right? Get as far away from, this guy as you can. Not the fault of the people, nothing like that at all. But again, when you see a resignation, a big resignation from a ministry like this happen, to where again, it's sudden and it's immediate, with no, proper send off, no training anybody to take your place. You're just gone right then and there. Something big had to have been going down behind the scenes that would have led Chris to do what he did. Just go back to his statement. He said that he's heartbroken. Heartbroken. What could have happened that could cause him to be heartbroken? What does he know? Will he share it? Will it eventually come out anyway? 'Cause sometimes it does. Well, this remains to be seen. And look, there were a lot of people when the Mike Bickle allegations first came out with IHOP KC, because I have to mention this. This is important. And when Rick Joyner was, doing everything he could to kind of, prop Mike Bickle up and call him his friend and everything else like that, if you remember, there were a lot of people that were saying that once, because look at what is IHOP KC now? They've been reduced to basically just the prayer room, right? The church, the Forerunner Church is gone, right? They've basically shut down all of their ministries. And people were saying that Morningstar would be next. That God would go after Morningstar next. Because we have been seeing now for the better part of a year, all of these mega ministries that have been targeted. They're being exposed. God is lifting the veil. Why? Because judgment starts first in his house. So did Chris know that something was coming? He says, I better get the heck out of here because God's about to just blow the roof off this place in a major way. I think so. I definitely think so. And so you'll continue to hear Rick Joyner probably, doing everything that he can to, everything's good here at Morningstar, right? It's just Chris just deceived. Just deceived. We will see. I don't think this is the end of this. We're going to get more info on it.
And that will conclude today's program. For those of you that have been following me, know that I believe that Chris Reed is a false teacher. He's a false prophet. He's to be avoided at all cost, along with Rick Joyner and the Morningstar ministry. It's all ungodly. It's not of God. It's heavily connected to the New Apostolic Reformation cult. Avoid all of that at all cost. Thank you for being with me on the Word of Truth broadcast.